Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast, and we've made it, the big one, the middleweight showdown that we've been waiting for. My name's Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor-in-chief at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how you doing today?
All good, all good. We were just talking off air. Luckily, Tim, you're Tim, of course. Luckily, Jeremy and Jack covered off UFC Vegas, I think it's 64 this past weekend, where Amanda Lemos knocked out Marina Rodriguez, and there wasn't an awful lot of talking points from that. So we can just jump straight into the UFC 281 preview, break that card down, because from top to bottom there are competitive fights from the first fight on the card all the way to the middleweight main event. You know, this is an exciting one, and I mean, arguably from top to bottom, it might be the strongest card of the year so far.
Yeah, from top to bottom, yeah, this is kind of the big UFC closeout one before the end of the year. UFC 281 is a good one. 2 title fights on it, and 2 pretty great title fights on it. But yeah, even like we were talking, I think last week, the headliner on the prelims is better than a lot of fight nights. But let's talk about there was some betting inconsistency.
Yeah, now be careful if you're having a bet on 281, because they'll be straight on top of you after this weekend.
And I feel like, so this is a really interesting story that they're talking about. The fix might be in. There was something interesting that went down during the Derek Minor and Shaylin, sorry about the name, Nurdan Nbukie fight. Tell us a little bit more. Bring us up to date here.
Yeah, so obviously, as we know, that the fight ended pretty early in the first round. Derek Minor threw a body kick, seemed to, land with on first look, seemed to just land with the toes on the rib, on the hip, or maybe just landed with the ankle. And clearly, stepped back and was clearly in pain. It reminded me a little bit of the if you haven't seen the fight, and if you haven't seen the Derek Minor fight, I'm sure you've seen the Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier 2 fight. When he kicks McGregor, we did a breakdown on the site. McGregor kicks almost kicks the elbow, and Poirier managed to get his elbow up and block the kick, and he points Poirier to points to McGregor and say, look, I sort of, it's not quite a leg check, but it's a sort of an elbow check almost. And the similar thing, almost seemed to happen here. But Minor landed the kick on sort of the hip, and stepped back, was in invisible pain, threw the kick again, and then a flying knee sort of was the beginning of the end for Charlin. And
here's the weird thing, though.
The difficult thing about this. So on first watch, it is what it is. Throws a kick, gets injured, gets kneed, gets ground and pounded, gets finished. Happy days. No controversy around it. Now, since the fight has come out, we've seen massive odds. The odds drop. The odds drop massively for Minor to become an even bigger underdog. And the understanding is that he was pretty severely injured going into the fight.
But the weird thing is, all the bets came in for a first-round stoppage, which Shaylin had never won a first-round stoppage. There was this is the weird thing of something was in, yeah?
Exactly. And and first of all, it goes back to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago with TJ Dillashaw. What are the UFC medical staff doing? Because if he's going into a fight so injured that the first kick or the second, third kick he throws, he's pretty badly injured. If it's common knowledge between teams and bettors that he is injured, and the sort of accusation is that he kind of almost threw the fight in order to assert somebody, we don't know who, gain a lot of money off it. Now the interesting thing is, and I don't want to be clipped, and I don't want anyone to accuse me of accusing James Krause. However, he was very vocal recently. He does actively bets on his fighters. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it came out that cannot be done anymore. Teams and UFC fighters cannot bet on their own fights. It's the same in professional football over here, or soccer, if we're American friend. But you cannot bet on your own team. You cannot bet, I don't think, at all. It's against the rules. You cannot bet on the sport that you play in. Now, the claim is that the knowledge of Minor's injury had been leaked to certain people, and I'm just reading the ESPN article. We'll link it down below. Mm-hmm. On Saturday, with rumors circulating among bettors that Minor was injured. Again, I'm similar to you. I don't want to butcher his name, but Minor's opponent's odds to win moved from -220 to -420 in the 4 hours before the fight. Just 30 seconds into the fight, Minor threw a left kick, immediately grimaced, and it was stopped 1 minute 7 into the first round. it's very difficult, and it's going to be difficult to prove that the information was leaked. But this is a massive issue. A, because how was Minnow allowed to go in and fight that fight if he was so injured that he threw the first kick he threw, he injured his leg? But B, it's so difficult because why all of a sudden and it's worth remembering that this fight got bumped up to the main card. This fight wasn't originally on the main card. Jay Sherman and Josh Partizan were on the main card, and Partizan had to withdraw from that one. So it's worth noting that in the 4 hours before that, they found out that they were on the main card, and then the betting odds drastically changed. It's not a swing of a tiny amount. This is almost doubled. He was almost 2 times. It's essentially saying he's almost 2 times more likely to lose the fight, or his opponent was 2 times more likely to win the fight. And for me, it's a difficult one because, like I said, it's going to be hard to prove. That's for minds far more in the know than me and you. Yeah. But it also kind of shadows the win of Minna's opponent. He just went in there. I really don't think he was a part of it. He goes in there to win that fight, same as Aljamain Sterling went in to win that fight. And for him to go up against an opponent who was injured, it will always have a little asterisk next to it now. But
yeah,
it's a really difficult, and it's worrying, to be honest, as well.
No, there's a bunch of weird folds. Sorry, I will correct myself. His opponent does have a lot of first round stoppages, just not in the UFC and not within the last recent memory, not in the last 2 to 3 years. He hasn't. So there's a bunch of weird folds, and James Krauts being involved in it, who's one of the bigger bettors. He's an amazing coach. He's very talented, but he's also one of the bigger bettors in the sport and does bet on his own fighters. But also the weird thing is, I didn't realize that there was so much internal systems that would actually do something. I thought this is actually kind of impressive. And there is a nice side to the story of the internal regulation systems that were set up to regulate gambling are actually working because they self-regulated on this. This wasn't an outside investigator looking in. This is their own investigation board. The own gambling casino boards were looking in. We're like, oh no, something's wrong here. It's something happened. So they're saying the fix might be in, but they're not saying anything. They're keeping their cards close to their chest. James Krause has not said anything. The manager of Derek. Of Shaylin said I don't know, what do you want me to say here? But it's a good. This is from Mark Ramundi at ESPN. But yeah, well, I was more impressed that there was actually some systems going on here, which I didn't expect at all.
Yeah, for sure, and I really do think that this will come to. We'll have to. This was only sort of released late last night. I only saw it early this morning, and obviously sent the article to you, and wanted to discuss it on the show, but. Later on today, tomorrow, and throughout the week, we'll get more information on this. But I'm just looking down Darrick Minner's record now. His first ever finish loss in the first round. So that looks a little bit sus in itself. He's not a guy. He seems pretty durable. He's fought people. He's fought Grant Dawson, who couldn't get him out there.
Yeah.
Darren Elkins couldn't get him out there. Obviously, Ryan Hall isn't a knockout artist, but he couldn't get him out there at all. He went 15 minutes. Herbert Burns, he finished him in the first round, but by triangle. Terrence McKinney, first round, triangle. So he's a durable guy. Yeah. He's had 40. This was his 40th fight. For Minner, I think the UFC, to be honest, I think the UFC are going to wash their hands of Darrick Minner. He's on. This marks his third fight. His third fight and his third loss. He's 2-4 in the UFC now. And to be honest, if they cut him, they can say the headline will be ex UFC fighter rather than current UFC fighter. And no disrespect to Minner, but he's not a big name. He's fought on one pay-per-view, 5 fight nights. Sorry, and I just don't think he's not a big enough name for the UFC to keep him on. And he's not a ticket seller, and like I say, it's just easier for them to, once this is all wrapped up, to probably wash their hands. And they've got the excuse that he's on a 3-fight losing streak as well.
Yeah, it's bad press for the UFC, and the UFC is not in any wrong here, which
exactly
we usually can't say, but they definitely not done anything wrong here. This has absolutely nothing to do with them. The market self-regulated on this one, but yeah, we'll see what happens if there was any fix in. if anyone's being investigated. It seems like neither of the fighters involved knew anything. It's something else. Somebody else had phoned somebody else. It just moved too conveniently for it not to be in. You know what I mean?
It's a little bit suspect somewhere further down the line, isn't it? But yeah, so just a word of warning: if you are betting this weekend on UFC 281, keep an eye out for any late changes. If Alex Pereira limps into the weigh-ins and looks a little bit worse for wear, lump on Israel Adesanya. But
just keep your phone on. Like, one of these guys' coaches will phone you. Apparently,
exactly.
Man, we can't do this.
Eugene Barrowman's going to be on the phone saying, "Izzy's broke his right hand last week." But no, let's keep everything crossed that doesn't happen, because this one, UFC 281 main event, is an absolute banger. We don't want anything to get in the way of how good a fight it can be.
Let's start right at the top, I think. We won't bury the lead more than we need to. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. I've fought twice already in kickboxing. Close fights, both times. Both walk away. Without a doubt. Both were an Alex Pereira victory. Israel Adesanya switched to MMA. Looked like just a whirlwind fighter. He looked incredible. Picked up the title. Had a nearly flawless career. Even in his losses, he looks pretty good. Israel Adesanya really needs no introduction. Alex Pereira, an Aboriginal of Brazil. He goes out hunting with a bow and arrow. He is one of the coolest people I've ever seen in my life. One thing that sticks out to me before we really get to the technical analysis, both of these guys are so big. They are taller and longer than Dominic Reyes is. And Dominic Reyes is a tall and long guy for light heavyweight. And did you ever see, I think I posted the picture a while ago, Alex Pereira with a Big Nog? Alex Pereira, he's so much bigger than Big Nog.
And we've seen pictures of Pereira recently, and within the past month or so, and he looks huge.
He's big for a middleweight.
And it's not like
he's big for a heavyweight. He would actually be a fine size heavyweight.
Exactly. I think he would. I mean, I think with his style, he would compete. He's not going to lose any speed at heavyweight. I don't feel. Not an awful lot of speed anyway. But yeah, I think this is where as you alluded to there, the two guys have fought twice before, and I think people forget that they fought twice before. A lot of people just remember the Israel Adesanya being knocked out by Pereira in that second fight. But they fought to a very, very close decision in the first one. Personally, I watched, I've got an article coming out this week on how Pereira upsets Adesanya, looking at, the video analysis. And I would have given that fight to Adesanya personally. But, I know it's kickboxing rules. I'm not as familiar with kickboxing rules as I am with MMA rules. But I think what Adesanya may struggle with is he's always the physically taller, longer guy. Maybe not always the physically bigger guy, as we saw. He struggled against Jan Blachowicz. He was a much smaller guy against Jared Cannonier, who'd obviously fought up at heavyweight. Paulo Costa, he was physically smaller than him, but he's longer than these guys. His reach is longer. His height, he can utilize his height. And, not only is his reach longer, but he's obviously taller than these guys. So that accentuates his reach even more. The taller you are, I could have a 50-inch reach, you could have a 50-inch reach, for example, and you be 6'5" and I be 5'5". You're going to be able to lean into your shots more than I am. Now, this is what I think is interesting about this one, because it's even, in height and reach. I'm pretty sure they're the exact same height, same reach. So
I think they're 77 and then 6'4".
Exactly.
Like
so this, I think. That is going to make it. There is going to be a difference. Yeah,
80, both 6'4". Yeah, so they're equal.
Yeah, and I think that is going to make for a more interesting fight. Israel Adesanya, I posted an article a while back now about how he's, I think, the lowest or second lowest finisher of all active UFC champions, which is kind of worrying for someone who is supposed to be one of the UFC's biggest megastars. What made Conor McGregor shoot straight to the top? He was knocking guys out cold.
Yeah.
Israel Adesanya cruised to victory against Jared Cannonier, never put his foot down. Cruised to victory against Vettori, never put his foot down. Cruised to victory against Robert Whittaker the second time, never put his foot down. That fight with Yoel Romero, in a word, was boring. It's facts are facts, I'm afraid. And we were just lucky that we had Joanna versus Zhang Weili on that same card to have hyped everyone up. But, he hasn't finished a fight since he finished Paulo Costa back in September of 2020. So it's been over 2 years now since he's finished a fight, and on that run he's picked up a loss. But you know, in his past, since he beat Anderson Silva, he's gone to decision. Then he finished Whittaker, then a decision. Then he finished Costa, and then he lost a decision, and then 3 further decision victories. I think Izzy should be coming out and looking to finish Alex Pereira in this one to keep the fans on his side. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Alex Pereira, I think that he could, if he wants to, he could put his foot down and look for the knockout. But I don't think fans would get on Alex Pereira's back as much as they would get on Izzy's if he cruised to a victory. It's such an interesting fight.
Well, yeah, the onus is definitely on Israel. Like, if you are the champion, I know that the belt, like, we should really look at fighting as like in a vacuum. In this fight exists without the title, but that's not really reality. You do need to put people away to raise your stock, especially after 3, cruising victories. Even the Jan Blachowicz loss, I did say he looked good because he was so outsized in that match. But still, he was just happy to cruise. He knew he was behind quite a few rounds, right? But he's mentally able to cruise. And go ahead.
They're just forgettable fights, Unfortunately, again, I'm going to bring it back to Conor McGregor because I think Conor McGregor is the megastar that Israel Adesanya wants to be. Yeah. But if you can think of Conor McGregor's Dustin Poirier fight, where it was very memorable knockout. Dennis Eva, very memorable knockout. Diego Brandao, I think that was in Dublin, very memorable knockout. The Chad Mendes, how he came from behind, memorable knockout. The Jose Aldo knockout is one of the most famous knockouts in UFC, in MMA history, not just UFC.
Yep. Knockout of the decade, easily.
Exactly. And, the Eddie Alvarez performance, not even the knockout, the performance as a whole, which, was the first fight in MSG, which is where this fight card's being held. Yep. Even his losses to the loss to Nate Diaz, memorable, because he kind of did everything that he could in that fight. Whereas Izzy against Jan Blachowicz struck me as kind of, like you say, I wouldn't for a second say that he was giving up, but he was aware that he was behind in that fight and couldn't physically do anything to stop it. The thing is with this fight, I'm not sure if this is the fight to really put your foot down on the gas pedal, as it were, and look for the knockout. Because, I mean, we saw in their second fight what happened. He kind of got into that brawl. He was outpointing Pereira. Pereira got a standing 8 count in that one. I think that was in their second fight. Pereira got the standing 8 count, and yet Izzy went in there to try and brawl with him and almost try and get that little bit of an ego kick back and try and knock him out. And obviously we all know what happened with that one. And Eugene Barrowman, his coach, said, look, that won't be happening again. That won't happen on Saturday night.
Yep.
Which maybe alludes to a more sort of point fighting style. The thing is with this one, I've got massive trust issues after Francis Ngannou Ciryl Gane, because this one should not hit unless there's a knockdown or a slip or anything. None of these fighters should have their back on the floor. Which is exactly what we said with Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane, and yet that turned into quite the wrestling affair. I've written an article about the keys to victory, the video analysis of Alex Pereira's game, and yet throughout the whole thing, I said, look, he needs to, these guys aren't going to wrestle. This will be a stand-up war. He doesn't need to worry about the takedown so much. Mm-hmm. And yet everything I'm reading suggests that Izzy may shoot for a takedown. 24 MMA fights against 7 MMA fights. Izzy's takedown defense, pretty much everyone Izzy's fought as at some point looked to, or debated at least, taking him down due to the fact that, he's such a good stand-up artist. And, you don't get that takedown defense without learning, a counter takedown against the fence or something to that effect. And, I can see these two guys fighting in the clinch a little bit. They fought a little bit in the clinch in their kickboxing fights. Izzy, doesn't like to actually fight in the clinch. I think he uses the clinch as more of a defensive, a wrestling defense, gets his back against the fence like fighters are taught, get your back on the fence and look to work the underhooks. But Alex Pereira works well in the clinch. Those knees in the clinch and the strikes in the clinch do work well for Pereira. But I do think that Israel does have the better, we've never seen it. I'm pretty sure if I just quickly look now, Izzy has never shot for a takedown, neither has Alex Pereira. pretty sure Francis Ngannou had never shot for a takedown in January when he fought Cyril Gane. So we don't know, how this one's going to play out. Everything suggests that this one's going to play out on the feet, which we hope, because, but I don't think, just how I think the fight's going to go, I don't think that this fight will be a blockbuster. I think we will see shades of Darren Till, Stephen Thompson, where both guys took 2.5 rounds almost to figure out each other's game. It's going to be a chess match because Izzy knows that he can knock him, that he can get knocked out. Alex Pereira showed against Bruno Silva that he can take a shot. Can he take Israel Adesanya's shots? He showed against Sean Strickland that he's got that knockout power in MMA with his hands. Yeah. Is he shown that he can knock Paulo Costa out, who's, probably, Paulo Costa and Alex Pereira are about the same, physical size. So these are 4-ounce gloves. These aren't the big sort of boxing gloves that they use in kickboxing, but it's a fascinating fight. And I don't understand why the UFC aren't promoting it more, but, I'm sure this week we'll get it rammed down our throats, which I'm not mad about at all.
No, yeah, I think they're going to put the hard sell on it this week. But like you said, there's a lot of folds and foibles to this fight. I think on the feet was the thing that I was really trying to suss out. And what I've been trying to say for a while is if you are Israel Adesanya and you're going to give your opponent 25 minutes, you're going to give Alex Pereira, the 2-division glory champion who's known for his left hook knockouts, 25 minutes. He's going to find that chin. But on the other side, his left hook is a counter strike. It's when people are pressuring him. It's a counter strike. So do you pressure him or do you not pressure him? This is why I think, like you were almost getting at, of like nothing could happen for a long time in this fight. It's also a very high stakes matchup of like there's a UFC title on the line. It's also the third time they fought. There's a lot on the line in this one, and you're going to leave it up to one punch. Israel might be more hesitant in this fight, and I'm not sure if that's the right game plan for him here, because we've seen like Alex Pereira, to set up a lot of his hooks, he does require actually quite a bit of range finding almost. Like he does need a lot of framing. He does use a lot of knees to kind of close and stuff like that. If you can get him to do his range finding work to bait the punch and then counter it, I know it's easier said than done, but like there are opportunities for Israel. And a lot of my thoughts of just like this, I do think this leads to an Israel victory. I just think it's going to be I think he's going to come away kind of looking flat. But what do you think, like, based on what I'm saying about framing and counters and stuff like that?
No, I completely agree. And I'll give a little spoiler to my article. Is one of the things that Alex Pereira, I rewatched the Sean Strickland knockout multiple times. I watched luckily it came in the first round, so I watched the fight multiple times. It hasn't really taken that long. And what he did throughout that fight is he bent low and jabbed to the body, and then faked the low jab to the body for the knockout. And jab to the body, but came round with the left hook. And I'll see if I can just share the article quickly now. I haven't posted it up on the website, so this is a little preview. So it won't be fully finished. But the distance between and where Sean Strickland's guard is on, he's dropped his hands in order to parry. The shot, and it didn't quite clearly it didn't work. So if I just share my screen here, okay, I can't share my screen, but it is what it is.
I don't know how to get you to do it. Yes.
It's never mind. But the point I'm trying to make is that the
article will be down below. We'll link it up later. The
distance behind between where Sean Strickland should be and where his parry should be and where his parry is massive. It's his hand is almost down by his waist when Alex Pereira comes round and lands that left hook. And like you say, it's kind of like he uses the jab as a rangefinder. He uses the framing as a rangefinder, but how is he going to frame if Izzy isn't there? If Izzy does hand fight a lot and he does leave himself quite flat-footed. Yep. So that's why I think Alex Pereira should leg kick Izzy, because we've seen Alex Pereira not so much in MMA. He used the leg kicks against Sean Strickland as more of like a sort of a point fighting leg kick almost. They he wasn't putting everything behind them. But in his kickboxing days, we've seen him really go to the legs. So, we know that he's got that in his arsenal. And again, against Sean Strickland, there was always the threat of the takedown. Against Izzy, there's not really any threat of the takedown. I think Alex Pereira has the faith in his own ground game. He trains with Glover Teixeira. If he does get taken down, that he can get back up or he can handle himself on the floor.
Yeah.
So I think, if Izzy does stand flat-footed and looks to hand fight, attack the leg, and he won't be standing too heavy on that lead leg again. And it's a really, like you say, you kind of agree with me and I agree back with you that this could be quite a, I don't want to say boring fight, because for me and you, I think it'll be fascinating because we're into that. But for the casual fan, I don't, who don't enjoy guys setting traps and don't enjoy guys kind of feeling each other out, I think it could come across as quite a boring fight. Whereas for me and you and, the people in the industry and people who really love the intricacies of the stand-up game, I think this could be fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not one to, I don't think your adrenaline, there's potential, of course, there's potential with Alex Pereira. We know that he's got that knockout power, 2 knockouts in 3 UFC fights. And with Israel Adesanya, we know that he can put on a show. He can be really exciting. But I'm not sure if your adrenaline is going to be pumping at 5 a.m. if you wake up early to watch this fight.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. It's such a hard fight. All roads just lead back to kind of a very patient, very very thoughtful, like kind of plotting fight. I do agree with you on the leg kicks. Like both guys have wide stances from kickboxing adjustments, and like that does leave you susceptible to leg kicks, and it does lead you to susceptible to takedowns as well. I know Alex Pereira isn't going to go for a takedown. Israel might, like you said. Best case scenario, let's say both guys are just thrown in the pocket because they got, I don't know, Israel doesn't fight like he did when he was young, and that wasn't even that long ago. Like he when he was kickboxing with more than 70 wins or something like that, he was a much more aggressive fighter. Even early to mid UFC career, he was a very aggressive fighter at setting up his shots. It's only very recently that he became a hesitant fighter. If they fight aggressively, I genuinely do think that Alex Pereira can walk away with a win, and I don't think he can defend the title, but I think he can win the title. If it's a slow plotting affair, then that's an Israel Adesanya fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I do think this is going to be, we've almost bashed the fight a little bit by saying
I know
it's going to be a boring affair, but it's not going to be a boring fight if you know what you're looking out for, if you know what you're watching, because and I'll be honest, a lot of people won't, even the casual UFC fan who watches UFC every week won't know a lot about Alex Pereira because they haven't gone back. This week I've watched hours of Alex Pereira kickboxing footage because I can't lie and say that I watched them the first time round. But Glory are really good at uploading big Alex Pereira fights onto YouTube, and I've got Fight Pass, so I can catch Alex Pereira's Glory fights on Fight Pass. Yeah, he is really good.
He's really good.
But he doesn't need me to tell everyone, but he is a really good striker. Israel Adesanya is a really good striker. Who's the better MMA striker? On paper, and as we've probably seen, it's Israel Adesanya. We've seen him outpoint some of the, we've seen him outpoint Robert Whittaker, where the threat of the takedown was there. We've seen him outpoint Jared Cannonier, where the threat of the takedown was there. We've seen him outpoint Vettori, where the threat of the takedown is there.
Yeah.
Against Alex Pereira, I don't think the threat of the takedown is there at all. It's the first fight in, looking down Izzy's record. Cannonier can take you down. Robert Whittaker can take you down. Vettori can take you down. Jan Blachowicz took him down. And then look who the last person he finished, Paulo Costa, where the threat of the takedown wasn't really there.
It's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
And with Yoel Romero, yes, he's an Olympic wrestler, but he never really looked for the takedown. But that was that's almost an asterisk. We don't want to talk about that one. But if you look at the fights that he's finished, Rob Wilkinson, the threat of the takedown wasn't really there. Rob Wilkinson's a stand-up guy. But then Vettori, Brad Tavares, both of those were, fights where he could be taken down. But then Derek Brunson, he did finish the fight, but that was off, after he defended a takedown. Anderson Silva, again, was a different fight because that was bumped up to the main event sort of later on. And then we got the absolute war with Calvin Gastelum, where, the threat of the takedown was there, but so was the threat of the stand-up. And I think that's where Izzy kind of really sort of rose to the occasion. But then you look at the Robert Whittaker first fight, is Whittaker came out in that first round like a cannonball, and in the second round constantly throwing massive looping overhand rights and hooks.
Yep.
but the threat of the takedown wasn't there, and Israel Adesanya finished him. So when the threat of the takedown isn't there for Izzy, he seems to do really well and finish these fights. When the threat of the takedown is there, he seems to sort of almost fight within himself because he's worried about being taken down. Vettori, Whittaker, Cannonier, Romero to a degree. But even the Jan Blachowicz fight, we didn't see him open up even before he was taken down. I think the first maybe 2.5 rounds, he wasn't really taken down, and even then we didn't see him open up because the threat of the takedown was there. With Alex Pereira, like you said earlier, he's not shooting for a takedown unless, I don't even think if he was hurt, bloody, bruised, not all with it, I still don't even think that his go-to would be to shoot for a takedown. Like McGregor, McGregor against Diaz, he was hurt, he was tired. He shouldn't have shot for that takedown, but he did, I think, because that's in the back of his mind that he's an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Alex Pereira, I don't think he's shooting for a takedown, even if he's hurt, dazed, tired, bloody, bruised. I don't see Alex Pereira shooting for a takedown in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Which means that we're going to get a 25-minute wrestling match. But no, but the I kind of co-sign with you. I think this may even be we could even see it finishing this one from Israel Adesanya, because he will open up slightly more. I think he's arrogant enough in his own stand-up game, which is confident, arrogant enough in his own stand-up game that he can avoid the shots of Alex Pereira. He was doing so in that second fight until he didn't.
Yeah,
and that left hook came from a sort of brutal exchange where he just came out on the canvas, as it were.
Yeah.
But there is bad blood between these two as well. After Alex Pereira knocked him out, he sort of, he I don't know what he said, but he sort of taunted him in his face.
Mm-hmm.
I think Izzy could get a finish in this one, and I will be picking Izzy to win, whether it be by finish or by decision. I'll decide later on in the week. But I think this kind of a style does lend itself to Israel Adesanya, especially because he's used to the big stage as well. Alex Pereira isn't.
That's true. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. And I think Alex Pereira was celebrating so much. The reason that we see it so much, him celebrating during the highlight, is because he was losing. He was really happy that he got the knockout because he wasn't ahead in that fight. It was a big deal for him to come back. I want to pick Israel as well, but I want Pereira to win because I like the storyline, and I like the I think champions really need their foibles, like Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen, really just put him over the top. You need a rival to really push you, and Alex Pereira is such a good rival to have. He has the look, like he has the style to do all this cool stuff. But yeah, on all analysis, the thing is that when we really break it down, and I think you discovered this as well, Alex Pereira sometimes he looks like he doesn't have 25 million tools as a kickboxer. He has like 3. He's just really good at funneling opponents into those 3 exact tools. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have this amazing repertoire where he can do a bunch of things. He has like 3 things that he does well, and it worked. He with 2 titles in Glory defended these titles. Like, it's a big deal that they worked. But tell me when I'm wrong here. Go on. You know what I'm talking about?
No, it's the rather than train 1,000 kicks one time, train the same kick 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's
how many times has Alex Pereira thrown that left hook? How many times has he thrown that switch knee? That he's got multiple knockouts with switch knees in Glory and obviously in his UFC debut.
Yeah.
One thing that does concern me that we haven't mentioned is Pereira's gas tank. In Glory, he always seemed to maybe fade slightly. And against Bruno Silva, he didn't seem to have, too much in him at the end of that fight. Arguably, Izzy should put it on Pereira for the first 2 or 3 rounds and see we know Izzy can do 5 rounds. We know Izzy can do 5 hard rounds. We know Izzy can do 5 rounds after he's hurt, like we saw against Calvin Gastelum.
Yeah, true.
And he didn't even look too tired against Jan Blachowicz when, it was more frustration rather than being actively fatigued.
Yeah.
I think if I'm Israel Adesanya, I'd put it on Alex Pereira for the first round, I'd play counter-striker and see what Pereira wants to do. And then for the second and third rounds, I put it on Pereira and try and lean on that gas tank, because Pereira is probably going into this not overconfident, but he's coming off that big win against Sean Strickland in the first round. He's got the knockout in his UFC debut early in the second round after he was wrestled in the first round, and then he went three rounds with Bruno Silva. But again, he didn't look great, and we have seen him in his Glory days not look too fresh in the final rounds, and they're 3-minute rounds. These are 5-minute rounds. If I was Izzy, I'd try and wear on the leg, land the knees up the middle, maybe even get him into the clinch and try and sort of wear him down, because none of these guys are built for grappling. They haven't grappled since they were young. Like a Damian Maia could grapple with you for 25 minutes and not be tired at all at the end of it. If Israel Adesanya grapples with Damian Maia for 25 minutes, Israel Adesanya is more fatigued than Damian Maia, and it's just how these guys are built. And I think that could be a factor as well. I don't think that it's going to play too much a factor, and I really hope that it doesn't, because I don't want this fight to be determined on who's the fitter man. That's let's leave that to sort of influencer boxing. Whoever's actually gone on a treadmill probably wins the fight. But let's hope that both of these guys' gas tanks last for as long as this one lasts. But I think I am going to pick Adesanya, but maybe not even convincingly. Like you said, this could be a bit of a snooze fest. But this isn't the fight that Israel Adesanya opens up and really goes for the knockout, because as we've seen, when he does exchange with Alex Pereira, it doesn't always end quite the way he plans.
Yeah, and if it was any other 2-division glory champion where they didn't have the history, but the guy fought exactly like Alex Pereira, I wouldn't hesitate to pick Israel. But because they have 2 fights against each other, it gives you pause. But I had to back off and just forget about those 2 fights. Who looks better? And it is Israel Adesanya is the better fighter. But it's again because he has 25 million different moves that he can do, whereas Pereira has 4. But yeah, I think we're both picking Israel here, kind of on the same wavelength. Let's move down the card, because it gets interesting. Could this one be good or bad? Carla Esparza versus Zhang Weili, the former champion Zhang Weili looking to get it back from Carla Esparza, the American wrestler, the Cookie Monster. Maybe not a crowd favorite. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I think Esparza deserves an apology from certainly from me, because I didn't give her a chance against Rose Namajunas, and she won that one.
Technically, she won. Technically, nobody won.
She won that one. The fans lost. The viewers lost. Everybody lost. Thank God we had Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje as the main event in that one, because my God. But and the UFC have taken the piss by putting that as the free fight this week on their YouTube channel.
So
that is
funny.
They almost if you want to do that, subject yourself to Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2. It's on the YouTube channel of UFC. But if I were you, I'd swerve that one. But no, this one, looking down the record of Carla Esparza, he's good. Alexa Grasso, majority decision victory. Michelle Waterson, split decision victory. Marina Rodriguez, who obviously fought this weekend, was in the title conversation before she lost this weekend. Split decision victory. Yan Xiaonan, finish. And then Rose Namajunas, split decision victory. And then you look down the record of Zhang Weili, she's lost, 2 of her last 3.
Very different styles, though. You got to give it that. Very different
Completely
styles.
Different styles.
Contrasting as it can be.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes this one so fascinating.
Yeah.
The UFC want Zhang Weili to win this.
Absolutely. 100%.
So that they can set up that all-Chinese fight between Zhang Weili and Yang Xiaonan sometime next year.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a really interesting fight, And for me, it's how we know what Carla Esparza's going to do. She's going to come in, she's going to look for the takedown, and when she gets the takedown, it's very difficult to get her off. For Zhang Weili, I've got an article coming out this week that I wrote months and months ago. Like, I'm talking sort of 7-8 months ago, about how her game, she's a rare breed, how she sort of picked up pretty elite wrestling later on in her career. And I think, will we see Zhang Weili go for a takedown, and look to, ground the fight and actually, win in a wrestling realm? Or is she just going to stick to what she knows, stick to how she won the title with pretty savage, brutal stand-up? It's interesting for me. I really think this is going to be an interesting. God, I hope it's going to be a more interesting fight than Esparza's last fight. But with Zhang Weili, she took Joanna Jędrzejczyk down last time and dominated her, and then she finished it by spinning back fist, which I think
Awesome.
that we'll see a similar sort of game plan out of Zhang Weili this week. We saw a high crotch Francis Ngannou this week. She's strong.
I know.
If she wants to take Carla Esparza down, physically, I think she can. Whether she can get into those positions to take Carla Esparza down with the threat of Carla Esparza's takedown, I'm not so sure. I'm going for a Zhang Weili victory. The disappointing thing is with this is that the two fights that sandwich this and the fights further down the card are just, they've got a lot more backstory than this fight. I haven't seen any of these women talk about this fight even ahead of it, which, they really are not selling this fight. And, Carla Esparza as a champion is going to come into this as a big underdog.
Yeah.
And yet she's proven time and again that she shouldn't be counted out. But what I will say is that, the UFC just aren't hyping this up to be, this is a title fight at the end of the day in what was at one point one of the most exciting divisions in the sport.
Yeah.
And there's no talk. I've seen more talk about Frankie Edgar's retirement fight, which we'll go on to talk about in a second, than the co-main event strawweight title fight. And it's disappointing. But then you've got we've gone into the Alex Pereira Israel Adesanya trilogy. This is the third fight between the two men, first in MMA. There's far more questions about that. We've got Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, guaranteed banger. Frankie Edgar retirement fight, Dan Hooker moving back up to lightweight. All throughout the card. We'll go on to sort of almost do a sentence on each fight, because if we went in depth on all the fights, we'd be here all day.
But let me jump on the Zhang Weili. You're picking Zhang Weili hesitant. I'll give you a little bit more faith on that one, because I think Zhang Weili does win this fight based on her wide stance. I think the wide stance is very good to defend takedowns, and it's also very good to generate power. Zhang Weili is consistently someone who's very strong. She has a good eye for timing. I think she's just going to find her mark against Carla Esparza. I think this will look a lot like when Zhang Weili knocked out the champion. Let me find her name for it. Jessica Andrade. Her ducking in, kind of hesitant to go for takedowns. If you don't fully commit to a takedown, Carla Esparza also doesn't set up takedowns extremely well. Like it's very good timing on it, but if you don't give her the opening, she won't. She won't do it. She's not going to do the takedown if you never give her the opportunity. I think this is actually a good fight for Zhang Weili. I think I'll actually pick her by TKO. I think it's going to be a fun stoppage.
Yeah, the only thing I think is if Zhang hurts Carla, because Carla, I don't think has got anything for Zhang Weili on the feet. I'm off the top of my head, I can't think that she's ever finished a fight on the feet by knockout. She finished.
Pretty confident that
she finished. Yang Xiaonan by TKO, but that was on the floor. She's got 3 TKO. She's got 2 TKO victories in 2012, and then that Yang Xiaonan that was Yang Xiaonan was tired, she was bloody, she was beaten. That was a wrestling TKO essentially. Mm-hmm. The only risk, if you remember the fight with Zhang Weili and Jessica Andrade, she hurt her, I think, with that knee, and then Jessica Andrade kind of went running across the octagon and wasn't able to land the takedown. Now, if Carla Esparza does get hurt, I think Zhang will then rush in, and she does leave herself open to being taken down. She doesn't leave herself open to shots like she did against Jessica Andrade, who we know is a one-punch knockout artist. Carla hasn't got anything, no disrespect, but I just don't, the evidence is there. She hasn't got anything on the feet with regards to knockout power for Zhang Weili. It's just the takedown threat that's there. But I completely agree with you. I think she will get her timing down early. She'll brutalize the legs of Carla Esparza early. I can see a later TKO, maybe 3 or 4. I don't see this going, too early. But also with the grappling exchanges up against the fence, Zhang Weili is 3 inches. Not only is she a lot stronger, but she's 3 inches taller, which means that she will be able to sort of dig those underhooks and get Carla sort of a disadvantageous position with her sort of arms lifted slightly up. And I completely co-sign with you. I think this has got a Zhang Weili 2-time strawweight champion written all over it.
Co-sign with that. Zhang Weili, this must be the first time she's had a size advantage. She's fought longer people for a bunch of fights. Exactly. This is the first time she's the bigger person. Let's move on to Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler. We were talking in the MMA Sucka group chat about this one because, looking back over MMA history, I think this era between Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and Michael Chandler. We're going to look back on this like this golden age of lightweight bangers when they all retire, because I don't think there's been a funner era or combination of fighters. And finally, this is the last one of like that. They've all fought each other already. Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler. We got a fireworks display coming up, right?
You'd hope so. And I think so. Let's be honest. This fight had to happen. It just makes a lot of sense. It makes all the sense in the world. We like you say, we've had Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. We had Dustin Poirier versus Alvarez twice. We've had Chandler Gaethje. Obviously, we've had Chandler Alvarez. Unfortunately, we haven't had it in the UFC. We haven't had it for I can't remember when they fought. Years. Talking maybe 8 to 10 years ago.
Maybe, yeah.
This is the only fight left of the four horsemen of the lightweight division, and it makes a lot of sense. It's the fight to make at the end of the day. Dustin Poirier coming off the loss to Oliveira, seems ages ago now that we saw Dustin Poirier. It was only December of last year. Michael Chandler obviously coming off the horrific knockout of Tony Ferguson, and that was in May of this year, and that seems like it was a long time ago as well. It is guaranteed. Obviously we haven't got a massive. We've only got 4 fights in the UFC to pull up Michael Chandler's stats about strikes landed per minute 5. Dustin Poirier has had a storied UFC career.
Yes,
strikes landed per minute 5.5. These guys are active fighters. Strikes absorbed 4.28 for Poirier, 4.87 for Chandler. Takedowns, they both shoot for, on average, a takedown, maybe 2 on Chandler's case per fight. Accuracy, exactly the same. Defense, pretty much the same, 64 and 71, and then they also both go for submissions. I can see Dustin Poirier mixing this one up far more than Chandler. I think Chandler will be there to stand and bang, because these two also don't like each other. Let's not forget there was that. I'm not quite sure where it stems from. I thought there was a lot of respect between the two, but then there was that conversation between the two ringside at a pay-per-view event before this one was announced. And they seem to have a back and forth. But, this one is guaranteed fireworks. And I don't even think that it's the kind of one where we say, Pereira and Israel Adesanya guaranteed fireworks, and it could be a sleeper. Michael Chandler, if you look at his fights, Dan Hooker, big knockout in the first round. Charles Oliveira, he almost finished Charles before, and then he got finished by Charles. Justin Gaethje, mental. That fight was crazy. And then the Tony Ferguson fight, he was losing. He lost the first round, in my opinion, to Tony. And then he came back with that front kick to the chin that we've all seen the screenshots of Tony Ferguson's face. And the same with Dustin Poirier. That first fight with McGregor, he brutalized the low leg of McGregor and then finished him in the second round. And then in that second fight, he dominated Conor. Yes, it was a doctor stoppage, but he didn't. He called.
He was winning. He was out-striking him. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. He was cruising to victory. He's so much bigger than McGregor, and I think he'll be a lot bigger than Chandler in this one. Although Chandler's a natural lightweight, and I don't think he could ever make featherweight. He's a lot big. I think he'll be bigger than Chandler, and I think this is just going to be such a good fight. And does it have title ramifications? Probably, to be honest. Michael Chandler, if he gets another win, things have changed. Charles Oliveira, I think they were both looking at UFC, both Dustin and Michael Chandler were looking at UFC 280, and they were happy that Islam Makhachev won because it's a fresh face. Michael Chandler wins this. He's a bigger name than Beneil Dariush. He's a bigger name, and arguably than Justin Gaethje as far as pull power is concerned. And he's on a 2-fight win streak. I think if Chandler gets the victory, he's the next in line. But with Dustin Poirier, we're not so sure. But again, Dustin's a big ticket seller, and I can see him getting a title shot off the back of this one. This is a fascinating fight, and one that everybody is excited for.
I think down the line, if Dustin wins it, I think it's a hard sell to maybe he beats Islam. I just think that's a hard sell, even for people like us who get hyped. Sometimes it gets sold on storylines. It's I don't know that he does. However, let's focus on the task at hand. I'm I'm a major Dustin Poirier fan. Like I put him up in those names of like Remy Bonjasky, Shogun Rua. Like he's one of the boys that I've liked for my entire career. I think Dustin Poirier is awesome. He's one of the most entertaining fighters of all time. He had some of the best fights in history in the UFC. He even was in the WEC for a short time. He's headlined at featherweight. He's headlined at lightweight. He's got interim titles. I think he's one of the most amazing fighters in history in terms of like, you were a bad fighter. Now you're a skilled fighter. He's really turned his career around. Having said all that, I genuinely think he's on the other side of his career at this point. And it's very hard for me to say, but I think age and damage are starting to add up. Motivation, yeah. I'm still not 100% sure on motivation because, like, if we're not sold on Islam, I think he's quite realistic about his odds in that fight. But I do think this is going to be the fight where we actually see, like, oh, Dustin might be on the other side of his career. He might only have a handful of fights left. And that's hard to say. That's hard to admit. But I think this is going to be the one where we see, I want to pick Dustin. I really do. But I think might be it for his career.
I completely agree.
This forever.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like you say, if you just take into account the damage that he's taken, dating back to 2017, we've had Jim Miller, who absolutely brutalized his calf.
Yeah.
That Eddie Alvarez first fight was
the war,
a battle for as long as it lasted.
Yeah.
Anthony Pettis, main event. Justin Gaethje fight.
A war.
Eddie Alvarez 2, a war. Max Holloway, a war. Khabib,
one-sided beating.
One-sided, but he lost that one. Dan Hooker, a war, and he had to take so much time off for that. Conor McGregor, now, he didn't take a lot of damage in those two Conor McGregor fights, but psychologically, it's tiring to face Conor McGregor. You constantly have to be switched on. And then Charles Oliveira, war. And now Michael Chandler, war. I think Dustin Poirier will go straight into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Just because, dating back all the way to,
Korean Zombie in 2012.
Exactly. Into his WEC days, into his featherweight days, into his sort of interim title where he's going back with Eddie Alvarez, he's going back and forth with Justin Gaethje. Then he has the interim title with Max Holloway. Then into his title days against Khabib and against Charles. And now he's still in, this is third fight on the card. It's a 3-round fight. And yet it's against Michael Chandler, who always comes to fight. And if you look down, I think, the last time that Justin Gaethje fought in a 3-round fight was that Eddie Alvarez illegal knee back in 2017. He's had
a minute.
three main events at fight nights. 4 main events at fight nights, and his last 5 fights have all 4 of his last 5 have all been main event pay-per-views. He's a big star, but luckily for Dustin Poirier this week, he can just focus on Michael Chandler. He doesn't have to focus on promoting this card. The fight itself promotes itself.
Yeah.
The McGregor 2 fight, in my opinion, was a hard sell because he dominated him so badly in that first fight and knocked him out cold. Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira will sell this fight card. That's the headline fight for a reason. But Poirier can just focus on Michael Chandler this week. And I do. It's very difficult for me. I think this one maybe goes to decision, or as entertaining as it will be. With that being said, we've seen Michael Chandler hurt, and we've seen Dustin Poirier knocked out by Michael Johnson, who's not the biggest puncher in the world. Yep. So it's going to be an entertaining one. I'm flip-flopping a lot, and again, I'm going to have to listen to and watch a lot more sort of fight week content before I fully make my decision.
Yeah, maybe we're Hart Poirier, head Chandler kind of thing of like,
exactly.
Because Michael Chandler, I maybe put in that same category of taking damage. He hasn't shown it so far, and he's been in like wars with like Brent Primus and the Alvarez fights. He was also getting knocked out by like Will Brooks, who's a very good fighter back in the day. But he looks fresh all the time. He's kind of defying age. Whereas I think Poirier, he has to start showing that damage sometime, and I just think this is it.
Yeah, and with Michael Chandler, it's strange because I know that we can't take too much away from Instagram, but he never seems to actually train MMA. He's constantly training sort of strength and conditioning, which is arguably why he can go for 15 hard minutes, 25 hard minutes, which is, it's working. Everyone should stop actually training MMA and just do strength and conditioning workouts.
And he hits hard. He's got a good eye for timing with that power, like the knockout against Benson Henderson, which was a great knockout. But yeah, for some reason he's just Also, in his MMA fights, he also doesn't even look like he trains MMA. He just looks like he finds that opening, like against Charles Oliveira, Tony Ferguson. You're just like, oh yeah, that guy works out, doesn't train MMA. I know that sounds stupid. Obviously, he does train MMA, but it's just like he's waiting for the openings.
No, for sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? He's just waiting, and he finds the openings and gets the knockouts, but sometimes he's just hanging out.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And, we've seen he's got that power. He knocked down Charles Oliveira. He knocked out Tony Ferguson. He knocked out Dan Hooker. And I mean, some of the shots of Justin Gaethje would put down a horse. So, but it's Justin Gaethje, isn't it? So it's going to be an entertaining one, like I say, and I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. It's a banger all day. Frankie Edgar's going to get his retirement fight, and he's going to get brutalized again. Do we have any disagreements?
It's a rough retirement fight, man. Chris Gutierrez is legit, and he's arguably should be in the top 15 now, but I mean, he's throwing Frankie a bone, man. He's coming off 2 big knockouts as well. It's not like he's coming off 2 close decision victories. He got sent to the shadow round by Corey Sandhagen with that flying knee. And then he was beating Chito Vera until Chito just front kicked him and knocked him to hell, man. I mean, and then you give him Chris Gutierrez, who has been on a tear. If you look at some of the guys that Chris Gutierrez is, I mean, since, in the UFC, I know it's an ultimate fighter, but he lost to Barcelos. No, that's not a bad thing. But he's gone on a 6-fight win streak, including that as a draw. But he got a leg kick victory. He's got, decisions against Andre Ewell, and then last time out, spinning back fist and elbows victory. I mean, what? It's not even like Frankie Edgar's pissed anyone off. I mean,
thing. Whose wife did he sleep with at the UFC office to get this matchmaking? You know
and
what
it's
I
not
mean?
like, it's not like a Legends fight even. With Frankie Edgar, you could maybe say, oh yeah, give him a Dominic Cruz. Why is that not the fight to make? But I completely agree. Chris Gutierrez is probably gonna finish Frankie Edgar on Frankie Edgar's last ever fight in New York. But UFC gonna UFC.
If Frankie wins, it would be an amazing moment. It would be
I'd
really
love Frankie
cool
to
moment.
win, but Chris Gutierrez is about that life, unfortunately.
Yeah, the young, hungry. I don't know. The UFC likes to bury their stars, and I would have liked a star versus star fight. Like even just looking at Cub Swanson, he's just out injured all the time. How about a rematch with Cub Swanson? That was just a few years ago. They were legends in 2018 when they fought. They could do it again. I don't know. There's a ton of good options.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. But I'm going to start getting emotional about Frankie Edgar finishing what is, the guy fought at lightweight, for God's sake. Rafael Assunção's at bantamweight now. Give him Rafael Assunção. Give him, I'm just looking at Davy Grant. Yes, he's knocked a fair few people out, but he's not a one-hitter quitty. Riaha, sorry. Just looking down, these are guys that they're exciting fighters. They're well-known names. And the thing is with Chris Gutierrez is he's not even the biggest name. And yet he's going to get a big scalp to get him into that top 15. Fair play to him, but it's a shame if you're a diehard Frankie Edgar. Can Frankie turn back the clock? I'd love to see it, but I just can't envision, and I can't see it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. Like, if you're trying to put someone over the top and sell them, why is it this guy, not like Song Yadong or like I'm trying to think of someone else there, or like an Umar Nurmagomedov or a Jack Shore? Like, why are you giving him the selling point? However, maybe Frankie wins, and maybe that's what the UFC is.
Well, then look, no disrespect to Chris Gutierrez. I'd like Frankie to win, but I can see Chris winning fairly straightforward as well.
Absolutely. Next fight on the card, we have Dan Hooker making his nervous return back to lightweight against the Prince of Peru, who is on a 5-fight win streak in the UFC lightweight division. What do you make of this one? It's so hard. It is so hard being a fan of Dan Hooker.
Yeah, because if you look at his last win, it was 2 fights ago against Nasrat Haqparast.
Yeah.
Nasrat just isn't at that level, and it wasn't even that convincing a victory. We always go on about how Dan Hooker is this elite stand-up guy who's knocking people out. He hasn't finished anyone since, Glass Chin James Hook back in 2019.
Yeah.
But then you look at his run before that, he finished Ross Pearson, finished Mark Jacasey, finished Jim Miller, finished Gilbert Burns.
I know. It's amazing.
He shouldn't have ever gone down to featherweight. I don't know what we were thinking allowing that to happen, but, it is what it is. But then you look at the guys that he's lost to. Dustin Poirier, who just talked about, Michael Chandler, who just talked about, Islam Makhachev. now the champion, Arnold Allen, on the cusp of a title shot, and that was in London. I think this is a good fight to get him back at lightweight, but it's not going to be an easy fight with
It's
any,
not.
you know, it's not going to be an easy fight. And if you look, you know, the guy's
bars,
got
I know.
three. I've just realised he's got 3 knee bars on his record,
just in the UFC alone, including the other stuff. He's got overall 7 out of 12 wins were via submission. That's insane.
So we know what he's going to look to try and do, and I'm not quite sure if Dan Hooker's got the game where he can stop that. You know, this kind of reminds me of that Frankie Edgar fight where you're trying to build someone up off the name of a well-respected, well-known guy, and it's going to be difficult. You know, we've got Dan Hooker on the card with Israel Adesanya, with Brad Riddell, with Carlos Ulberg. So, you know, they've got that sort of team feel about it. But, you know, it's going to be difficult for Dan Hooker, but he always comes to fight, and, you know, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and it might just be like an Alan Belcher versus Huzumir Paul Harris thing, where Alan Belcher just gets in the guard and grounds and pounds him from the guard. And
exactly.
That could very well happen. Dan Hooker's a gamer enough to not be nervous or scared about that kind of stuff. He might get knee barred, or he might win by TKO. Let's not. Brad Riddell versus Renato Moicano. Wait, didn't Renato, was he not retired at one point? Or did he?
No, I don't. Not off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure because he had that strange fight with RDA, didn't he? Where he went up in was it up in weight or no? He came in at short notice, didn't he?
Yeah.
And went 5 hard rounds with RDA last time out.
Renato Moicano's a mixed bag.
Yeah, stock has gone up for that. And then Brad Riddell's obviously coming off that quick loss to Jalen Turner.
Yeah.
You know, within the first minute. This is a banger.
This is a banger.
This is a banger, and this is rightfully headlining the prelims. You know, we were going for an hour already, and we could talk another hour on just this fight alone. But we'll have to, you know, keep it short. All you need to know, guys, this one is a banger, and it's a really good fight. And you know, throughout for the rest of the card, we'll just do a quick sentence on each fight because, like I said, we've been going for an hour, and we could talk an hour on pretty much all of these fights.
Yeah,
all really exciting fights.
I'll take Riddell via TKO. Actually,
yeah, I think that's a good line.
Dominic Reyes, does he do anything to Ryan Spann, or is Dominic Reyes still in the hesitant, nervous fighter zone?
I want to see Dominic Reyes back to his best. You know, he's coming off that loss to Jiří Procházka. It seems like a hot second since we've seen Dominic Reyes fight. Well, I mean, it is a hot second since we've seen Dominic Reyes fight. But remember, this is the guy that beat John Jones.
He definitely beat John Jones, 100%.
Exactly. And, well, you know, and he hasn't won a fight since he hasn't won a fight against a light heavyweight since Volkan Ozdemir in 2019. He beat Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman had no business being in there at light heavyweight, coming off the back of a loss to Jacare.
Yep.
It's a good fight for Ryan Spann to get that name on his record, and you know Ryan Spann's looked good.
I know,
but it's just I don't know. This one I'll certainly tune in for it because both guys can knock each other dead, but I don't know how this one's going to go. It could be a rough night for Dominic Reyes.
If Dominic Reyes is in peak form, he's a really good fighter. If he's not, it's going to be a bad fight for him. That's it. Aaron Blanchfield versus Meatball Molly McCann. What do you think? What do you see in this one?
I'd love to say I see Meatball Molly McCann getting a hat trick of spinning back fist knockouts, but I don't get this fight. You know, they're built. These are two girls that they should be building up, and they're facing each other when I think they're both ranked pretty low in the division. I think, you know, the Brit in me says Molly McCann. The logical pick is Aaron Blanchfield. I think Aaron Blanchfield is just the better fighter with a higher ceiling, to be honest. And you know, she's young, Aaron Blanchfield. I think she's 23. Molly McCann is 32, but you know Molly McCann has looked good in her last couple of fights. Aside from the knockouts themselves, she's looked good in those fights. But so is Aaron Blanchfield. Unfortunately for Meatball, I think Aaron gets this one done.
Yeah, it's a tough one for Meatball Molly. I'm surprised that they made this one as well. But let's move on. For the rest of the card, what other fights do you see that you quite like or want to talk about?
Yeah, to be honest, it does get a little bit dicey the further you get down, but they're all recognizable names. You know, Matt Favola and Osman Azatar, who obviously was cut from the UFC for that suspicious bag package thing. But then
that's what it was. Yeah.
That'll be an exciting fight, and I always love watching Karolina Kowalkiewicz fight. She's coming off, she's coming off her first win. You know, she won in 2018. She won last time out against Felice Herrig, against Gomez Juarez, who she's all right. I hope Karolina wins this because I like Karolina. She's all right. I mean,
me too.
But aside from that, you know, Carl Torberg, if he doesn't get tired, he probably wins. And Julio Arce, we've got a piece coming out on the site this week about Julio Arce, an interview with him, and it was really good. It was a really good read. So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Montel Jackson and Julio Arce is so down on the early prelim card. This is a good fight. This could be on the main card for how good this is a good one.
For sure, but then you look at that main card, and you know you've got two title fights: Dustin Poirier, Frankie Edgar retirement, and Dan Hooker. So it's difficult.
Yeah. Anyway, so UFC 281 in the bag. We got through it. We did it. I like that we were so hyped, and then we started talking about it. Where it's like, all right,
yeah.
We'll see.
Without a doubt, it'll be a massive card, massive fight week, and be sure to tune in and keep it locked to MMA Sucka as well, because you know we'll have pieces coming out all week about this fight week. We've got an interesting piece by Andrew who's going to be looking at a lot of the MMA Sucka teams' favorite, not maybe the best, but their favorite lightweight fights. So be sure to keep an eye on the site for that.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a good one. You got some pieces coming out, and I'll put your author profile in the links down below for everyone to click on and to enjoy. But yeah, let's enjoy UFC 281 fight week. It's going to be a big one from Madison Square Garden. From Tim Wheaton, Frazer Krohn, thanks so much for your time, folks.
Thank you very much.